Morning. This is the Arm64 kernel update. I'm Akanksha Jain, and I'm joined by Mark Rutland from the Linux kernel team on Arm side, and we would be doing our usual Arm64 kernel updates. Now, for those people who are attending for the first time, this is about architectural features, standardization, virtualization, etc., etc. Let's go through what's the agenda here. So we have a bit of housekeeping on where do you find the architectural features from ARM perspective. A bit of recap if this is your first time or if you want to just refresh your memory on what did we discuss the last time. Then the infamous architecture enablement flowers. If you have not seen them yet, you will see what I'm talking about. What has been the kernel landing over the past 1 year. So I'll cover the deltas, giving a sneak peek on what we discussed last time. What's the ongoing development pipeline like in terms of architectural features? What's work in progress? What are our next steps? And few other highlights. But there is also a bonus of a few fun facts around Lisbon. Now, this is something I started in Madrid and I realized it was a good hit. So I am living up to that tradition. So you can choose to ignore the boring agenda and focus only on the fun facts. There are no prizes, but it's worth the quiz. All right, so let's get cracking. A little on the housekeeping, you have the architectural features that are on the developer page. So you can go there, download the XML file, the architectural extensions. The one example that you see here is 2022 architectural extension, that's ARM 8.9 features, and that pipeline is currently work in progress. I'll cover a part of it as we progress. And then a little bit of the recap capsule updates. So let's see. If it's your first time, there is a recap session for the one that happened in 23, LC24 that happened in Madrid about the kernel updates. Then if you want to catch up on what the extensions are for 2021, that's ARM 8.8. You have 2022, that's ARM 8.9. And then you have the new architectural features 23 and 24. If you want to get a little heads up on what's the Linux kernel Morello architecture or what's the context, that's there. Confidential compute for some background. Gig v5, there is a session by Lorenzo later today to cover the architectural updates from Linux perspective. There are spec details here. Scalable matrix extension, that's SME, probably more interesting from the client solution space. And then I have done a little shameless plug-in of FreeBSD updates because I couldn't get a slot this time. We presented the FreeBSD updates from ARM perspective last year, if you want to catch up on the recap. All right, time for the first fun fact. Have you seen this door anywhere in case you have roamed around in Lisbon? Okay, I bet this is a door you cannot ignore. Do you know what could be behind this door? This looks like something which is worth a skip, but actually it is not. Any guesses?
Where is 90?
I'm sorry?
Missing 90.
Other side of the road.
Other side of the road. Okay, these are okay, odd numbers.
I appreciate the focus, but the question is about the door. Okay, so this is behind the door. Wow. This is dated back to 1901, so it's more than 100 years old. And this is actually a bar cum museum. Now, the speciality about this is, of course, you have the drinks and the sandwiches and everything, but you have these knickknacks from literally all over the world, ranging from paintings to miniature toys to helmets to military artifacts, and they run thousands in number. When I did my research, I read that each time you go there, there's something new to find. There are like 5-6 rooms filled with these artifacts, and it is somewhere in the city center. The opening hours are still friendly. If you're around today evening, sneak out and have a look. I like the fact that people are taking pictures for this one. You can ignore the kernel updates, like I said. All right. So let's move to the first bit of architectural flowers. Like I said, if this is your first time, anything that you see in green has been enabled upstream in the mainline kernel. What you see in amber is work in progress. So we either have patches on list, RFC, ongoing discussions, feedback from maintainers, etc. Things which you see in red here is TBD. Now that TBD could be that we still need to do our initial due diligence, or we have just not explored the use case yet. Now this is like more of the previous generation of features in terms of deltas. I mean, no surprises. You have MPAM, nested virtualization, SP, KVM support. I would be covering them in the later slides, so just work in progress is good enough for now. So I'll move to the next one. That's 8.8, that's 2021 architecture extension. Then you have 8.9, 2022. And then you have a little around CCA and 9.x. In terms of deltas for 8.8, feat mobs, that's memory copy. This is now feature complete. What went in what kernel, I'll cover in a bit. On 8.9 side, we have MT4 patches that are on list, so that's progressing well. POE stage 1, that's permission overlay, has been merged upstream in kernel 6.13. On 9.x side, there has been a bit of churn on SME. I'll cover that later. We have Mark here for any follow-up questions. Then we have branch record buffer extension. That's something, again, I'll cover in a bit. Let's just scratch the surface around CCA because there is a dedicated session on confidential compute by Dan Handley, so I would not deep dive. But in terms of work in progress around CCA 1.1 features, we have planes, we have device assignment foundational support, we have memory encryption context for which public branch is already out. And then we have few things around the realm hardware specifications, the RHI bit on boot info injection prototype, guest private memory, that's work in progress too. One significant breakthrough is we have RMM 1.0, that's CCA 1.0 guest support that got merged upstream in the mainline kernel in 6.13. We are progressing well on CCA 1.0 host support. I'll again cover a bit of it in the later slides. Moving on, we have the system IP enablement. Now, no deltas as such on SMMU side. Then you have DMA 350 IP for which we have patches on list on the memory to memory support. In fact, if I'm not wrong, that's queued for kernel 6.16. On interconnect side, we have NI 700 and CMN S3 PMU support that got merged in kernel 6.12 or 6.13. We'll see that later. On core side, again, in terms of deltas from the last Linaro Connect, we have dynamic trace ID support that got merged in kernel 6.13. That's to increase the core count in a shared trace ID space. On gig side, like I mentioned earlier, we are picking up gig v5 architectural support on Linux and KVM. So in terms of kernel landing, like I talked, MPAM, again, just giving a heads up, we have a significant feat here. 30 out of 49 patches for file systems which have been merged in 6.15. I'll cover the details when I go to MPAM. Nested virtualization too, literally you have incremental merges every kernel cycle. I have a detailed slide for that as well. Feat mobs, like I said, is now feature complete. You have the last leg which was remaining, that was in kernel support, and that got merged in 6.15. Then you have a bit of interconnect, like I talked about. You have guarded control stack, EL0 support that got merged in 6.13. POE stage 1 in 6.13 again. And that's the duplicate, sorry for that, and DMA 350. DPISA is also merged in 6.13. And this is what we talked in the last Linaro Connect, so just for historical recall. All right, time for the next fun fact. Do we know what is this? Yeah, it's a kind of cave, but obviously it's a fun fact, so it has to be more than that. All right, this might be hard, so I'll not test your intelligence here. So this is an underground Roman gallery in Lisbon. Again, dates back to very old time in Roman era, like in the times of Julius Caesar and Claudius. Now, this has an entrance literally in the city center somewhere. So there is like a manhole, and you have to get inside, and that's an underground cave. But it is not open during major part of the year. In fact, on the contrary, it is open only 2 or 3 times a year in April and September, because most of the times this underground gallery is filled with water 1 meter deep. So it's only when it is pumped out is this open for access, and you can go there and marvel at the Roman ruins. So anyone who's a history buff, this might be interesting to you. All right, let's move on. What's the ongoing development? Now, I talked about permission overlay stage 1 support. That got merged in kernel 6.13, but we have ongoing work around memory protection. So basically the kernel hardening bit, you have page table protection for which you have patches on list, so that's progressing well. Then we have, when I was showing the flowers, on SPE side for 8.2, 8.3 or the continued SPE extensions, we have virtualization bit that was pending for a long time. And the reason for that was there was a need for an architecture redesign. There was a lot of churn around it over the past 1 year. The spec is now public, it's beta. We are doing a code first approach, so we have a prototype work which is in progress, and we intend to push the first patches on list somewhere in late Q3, early Q4. So that's the aim. One good part of this is that it wouldn't require the entire guest memory to be pinned. So it's only the buffers, which eases the software design. Gig V5, like I already talked about, you have beta spec, which is out. We have host driver patches on list. We will follow up with device tree support and ACPI later. For more details, plug into the session by Lorenzo. Branch record buffer extension, this is a 9.x feature. We have the foundational support patches that were on list, and a major part of that has been queued for 6.15. There is some decision pending on ABI drivers, so that's something which will be picked up. We are aiming 6.17 for the kernel landing on the host support side. And then for virtualization support, there have been background discussions. This is kind of gated on PMU pass-through mode, something which I'll cover in the later slides. Then there is one delta from last time which we have mentioned this time is performance CI. So internally in the ARM kernel team, we are running a set of benchmarks to monitor the kernel performance both in the infra and the client workload space. We also have an internal command line tool which we are using for this, and we intend to push it out in the public domain soon. Besides that, we are also collaborating with Linaro to explore the overlap and the next steps. And then guarded control stack, I already talked about. EL0 support merged in 6.13. In its current shape and form, it is more or less feature complete. There are a few EL2 bits, but they are not must-have. All right, that's Folios. So if this interests you, this is around the memory system optimization to improve the performance of we have taken an example of 4K kernel. This is also applicable for 16K and 64K kernels. Now, there's a little bit of context. I'll not go into those details on what this means and how does it help. But let's see in terms of the deltas or work in progress from last time. So you have around allocating large folios, multi-size THP that went into kernel 6.8. You have incremental merges around MTHP, large folio compaction, swap out, swap in, etc. On cont PT enablement, you have the basic support that landed in 6.9. We also have executable folio, which is being discussed. It was discussed at the Large Storage File System Memory Management Conference. More details there. We ran some internal workloads and found 10% improvement for Nginx. Then on break before make level 2, we have foundational support patches on list, actively being reviewed from the maintainers. We were earlier aiming for kernel 6.16, but now we're working on some feedback and we would rebase this cycle. So hopefully 6.17 is what is our revised aim. We are also collaborating with Ampere on linear map support and then some future work around vmalloc. All right, time for the next fun fact. Do you know what is this? Yes. Anything more that you, who said that? Yeah, anything more that you know about it? Yes, yes. So this is actually the oldest operating bookstore in the world. It was opened in 1732. And it started basically to attract Portuguese intellectuals and people wanting to come together, write things. To be honest, in 2010, it opened many branches across Portugal, but this continues to be the oldest bookstore, and that's in Lisbon. So if you are a book lover, happen to go to that store and buy a book, don't forget to get it stamped where it says that you've purchased it from the oldest bookstore in the world. All right, so nested virtualization. I'll do a quick memory recall on what did we discuss, of course, not line by line. So let's see. I mean, in terms of major parts, last time we stopped at version 11 series, which was a 43 patches patch set. And we also had pointer authentication support, which was at that time on list, and then it did land in 6.10. Now, after that, there was a bit of churn on KVM upstream. So there was a change in approach. Rather than having, a patch set of 60 patches, it was thought best to break it down into smaller achievable chunks to expedite the upstream merge. So from here, when I talk about it, is patch sets topic by topic. So you have version 5 and version 11, which is around adding EL2 support for stage 1 POE and PI, that's permission overlay and permission indirection. Then you have rebasing the register world switch. You have version 4 for nested PMU. To be honest, that's not a must-have for NV2, but that is good to have, and both of these got merged in kernel 6.13. Then we had version 4 for gig support, which was rebased again 6.14 RC1. And that also got merged in 6.15. That literally leaves us with the last fag end of nested virtualization 2 support. And out of this, version 3 patch set, which is a 17 patch set series, has the most crucial or critical patch, that is the second last one, which is the final flip switch, which basically allows to run a guest and virtual EL2 environments. So once this series gets merged, nested virtualization is finally done upstream. So the petal goes green. Of course, there would be continued performance optimizations and new architectural bits that would keep getting added, but NV2 in general then becomes Linux usable. So that's a big breakthrough, and it should be hopefully in the next 1 or 2 kernel cycles. All right, elephant in the room, MPAM. Some historical details or housekeeping for people want to know what MPAM is, how does it map in terms of feature parity with Intel's RDT. There are a few links there. You also have known issues cited there, latest MPAM spec, and then you have public snapshots. We try to rebase them, keep them active. The latest rebase is again 6.14 RC1. We also have few extra branches and public domain features on the Arm64 brand, so links there. Now, what has happened over the year? I think when we discussed last time, we were in the first statement. So we had the monitoring and locking series that got merged in 6.9. And that was like the penultimate series, a big feat again. Now, from there has been a lot of churn over the year, rebases, feedback from maintainers. Of course, it's not possible to go through every detail. So what I've done is try to summarize what's ongoing at the moment. So you have the current series, which is around file system switch. We had version 7, which was a 49 patch set series. Out of that, 30 patches have been merged in kernel 6.15. Again, a big feat. That leaves us with the remaining 19 patches and then a few feedback from maintainers. So you have version 8, version 9, and version 10, which are rebases in the last cycle. So it's a record feat because we had 3 rebases in the same cycle. One achievement again, or breakthrough again, is James Moss and Dave Martin, who have been working actively on MPAM, are added as reviewers for this file system patch series, or for REST control refactoring review. We are actively working towards the final rebase, that's version 11, which happened literally last night. And we would be pushing the series on list in a day or two, and hopeful that it makes to 6.16 kernel landing. Of course, thanks to all the partners, and I see the partners entering at the right time, for helping with their MPAM support. In terms of next steps, we have partition ID, which is progressing well. We have active engagements with partners on the mailing list. The patches are on the extras branch if you fancy that. KVM side, it's pretty status quo. Just to remind, Intel's RDT feature does not support virtualization. So our KVM support, ARM64 would be the first architecture to propose that. And of course, that requires a bit of community alignment. So we want to avoid the cost of rebasing, and which is why this has been deliberately kept sequential. The myopic focus is around REST control. Once we get through, we will pick up these pieces. In terms of future, we have PMU and stage 2 SMMU support, for which we have already begun the initial investigations, and we will pick up early community alignment somewhere in Q4. All right, so
When do you think MPAM is done?
depends, what do you consider as done? If you say REST control, it is done this cycle, hopefully. The remaining bits, agile way. Yeah, topic by
Hey,
topic.
I'll take REST control, that's good.
Yeah, REST control is literally around the corner.
That is good now, right?
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. All right. Time for the next fun fact. You missed the fun facts in the beginning. All right. Does anyone know about this? Yeah.
It's under the bridge, LX Market.
Okay.
It's kind of a art and a couple of restaurants over there.
Yes. So it's not actually a graffiti or a mural. It's a 3D art which is made from waste material. So this is by a Portuguese artist, I hope I pronounce it right, Bodelo II, who is very passionate about the global ecological issues and the waste we produce in our day-to-day modern life. And this is his way of artistically communicating that we have a lot of waste, and he makes these 3D paintings around the city. If you take a closer look, it's obviously not going to be exactly this way, but this is like a far view for the images. And if this is something which fancies you, all you have to do is go on Google Maps, type Bodelo 2, and you will get a list of images around the city that are these 3D murals. So yeah, it was a good thing. I really liked it, and all of this is free, so why not? All right, moving on, we have the ARM specification. There's a lot of information. It's a busy slide, so I'll not go line by line, but big picture items, you have FFA 1.1, few kernel landings around notification support, indirect messaging, FFA user space, which was on list last time in the Linaro Connect presentation, has now got merged in 6.10. Then we have few kernel merges for SCMI. UEFI standalone MM got merged upstream. Capsule update has been stalled because of an FFA churn, so we will pick this up in this quarter. And then dynamic tables, reorg, core support got merged upstream. We have a staging branch for dynamic Symbios table generator. All right, fun fact again. Does anyone know what is this?
It's the lift.
Which lift?
The Santa Rosa, there we go, yeah, something like this, right?
Okay, and
I was there last night, but I can't remember the name.
which is okay, but what is, like, what's unique about this?
It's an elevator.
Okay.
It goes up.
Wow, that you're getting it right. All right. So yeah, I mean it's elevator de Santa Gesta, which is basically Santa Gesta lift. Now this is also more than 100 years old. It is made of wrought iron, and that's the speciality. It is 45 meters high. It takes you to the top for rooftop views. Yes, there's a long queue for it. I think from some point it is also free of cost, but I'm not aware what's the destination. It's worth trying because it's like Gothic style of architecture for the lift. So yeah, definitely fancy going there. And a bonus. Do we know what is this?
28.
Yes, this is Tram 28, but what is this? Yes. So there is a funicular if you fancy having the Tram 28 kind of ride, but of course it's going to be crowded. If you are one of those Instagram persons who wants to click a picture but you wouldn't get space, try the funicular instead. There are two funiculars going up and down the hill. They stop in between, so it's quite Insta friendly. All right, SP PMU support. I talked about this already, so I'll just skim through the details. Interconnect PMU support. There were few kernel landings around NI700, CMNS3. On SP PMU side, we discussed about 2020 and 2021 architecture extensions. We were gated on PMU threshold event for the PMU pass-through mode. So that's basically supporting PMU direct access for VMs. Now, Google KVM team has been driving these patches. There are RFC patches on list. This is a prerequisite. Once this is done, it is a big gateway into PMU threshold event and also BRB virtualization. On 2022 SPE side, we have few kernel landings for transactional events, sample fields, etc. Work in progress for eBEP prototyping. And then on 2022 PMU, we have few mergers in kernel 6.13. Confidential compute. Okay, like I said, we have CCA 1.0 guest support that got merged in kernel 6.13. Host support is progressing well on the list. We have active rebases every kernel cycle. We also have EDK 2 v4 guest support that's on the public list. CCA 1.1, we are progressing well on memory encryption context, on planes, device assignment foundation, and live firmware activation. We are in the prototyping phase for that. Again, more details. There is a dedicated session by Dan Handley tomorrow at 11:10, and there's another one for RMM EL0 app framework by Sobi in case that fancies you. And the last bit is around scalable matrix extension and a bit on the open source GPU. So I think when we talked about SME last time, everything minus KVM support was merged upstream in kernel 6.3. But over this year, we had some feedback from the maintainers. There were some bugs, and it was unanimously decided to disable SME temporarily in the upstream Linux, mark it as broken until we do our due diligence and find an exhaustive set of fixes to re-enable it upstream. Mark Rutland has been on his toes all these months working on it. But the good news is that we have actually accomplished with that set of fixes. It's now already queued for kernel 6.16, a big feat. We have also worked with the Google team to get it backported to Android Common kernel 6.12 so that it makes way into Android 16. We have SME KVM patches on list, but clearly our myopic priority was first fixing the foundational support, so we would pick up KVM patches. Now, on open source GPU, again, more on context, we have the Penthor kernel driver, which made its way in kernel 6.10 last time. Now, what's happening right now? We are trying to switch Arm GPU from the previous DDK pan for us to also have Penthor kernel driver. And for this, we are taking baby steps, so downstream fork at the moment, and then eventually that would be upstreamed. We're also working with Collabora on PenVK, which is a Mesa open source Vulkan driver. And this is the last bit, literally. Do you know what's this? Any guesses? I mean, it's a hospital, clearly, no-brainer. What is the hospital about? Any guesses? Dolls, you say? Yeah. Yes, that's right. No kidding, this is the doll hospital. And they have a detailed website here in terms of the specialities and the admission process, etc. This is the kind of cabinet which they call as the hospital beds.
I've seen that in a horror movie, that's right.
All right. So this also started long back, once upon a time in 1830. And this, while I did my research, I realized there are more doll hospitals in the world, but this is literally the oldest. And dolls of all kinds, whether plastic, wool, cloth, porcelain, are treated here. If there's anyone from the UK here and you think NHS is broken, the dolls here have to wait for a period of at least 4 months to get admitted. There is, I'm not kidding, an admission date tagged on the doll before they are admitted on these beds. And once they are treated, they are handed back to the owner. Now, this is the funny bit. The philosophical bit around this is the person who started this felt very close to the society, and when kids used to come to the lady to ask for the doll to be treated, she would say, yes, I wouldn't treat them any different than humans. And that's the reason it started. This is in the city center. I think it is free, I'm not sure. But if you get a chance, yes, do check this out. So I think that was the last bit. Hope the fun facts were good and gave you some light moments. This is a bit more housekeeping on the resources and any reading material. And I'll open the floor for any questions. Sorry, Art. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Just a moment. Any questions, anyone for Mark or?
So I would like to see a flower with a test coverage as well. So that would be the thing that I'm expecting in the next sessions coming up.
Okay. Oh, when you say test coverage, what exactly do you mean? Is it around CI or?
These are the features, right? So which are being covered. So, but do we have enough test cases to test those? So are they upstream? So can we go and test this? Like it works.
Yeah, we don't have that documented at the moment. We can talk about that.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, everyone.